All right, thank you. I will not do this in Polish. I will do this in English, or if you want Swedish, it's up to you guys. But let's do this Swedish. I'm also a landscape architect, but I'm the black sheep among the landscape architects because whatever I am, I'm not a perfect fit. Because at the Botanic Garden, both in Kew but also in Gothenburg, I'm the black sheep because I'm not a botanist. I'm a horticulturist. But at the university, I'm not a pure landscape architect because I'm a plant freak. So I'm very much into plants, but wherever I am, when I'm traveling around the world, for example here, whatever, in the middle of nowhere in China, I always look at plants, how and where to use them. I always have my plant using glasses on when it comes to my focus when I read about plants, when I write about plants, or when I just look at the plants. So that's going to be the focus of this presentation, and that's the focus of what I'm doing here. But when it comes to urban trees today, we are in a very positive place. This is Stockholm, the capital of Sweden, because what we have today, and we didn't have 20 years ago, 25 years ago, we have a language that we can use in order to argue why we should have trees, why that tree should be planted there and not there, why we should have that particular species there and there, why we should have an increased budget when it comes to planting trees. And as a researcher, I would like to take some credit for this, because the language we have developed is this. Because today we can actually argue how important trees and tree planting is, because they can give us a lot of benefits when it comes to ecosystem services and so on. This is a very short, very easy compilation of the ecosystem service, trees and tree planting, and also, as you said before, the urban green infrastructure can deliver. And this, of course, have developed all kinds of movements. It feels like cities around the world are competing to planting more trees than another city, because we have this kind of language, and the movements can look like this. All this million tree planting project all around the world. I think the latest is London, who wants to increase the tree canopy with 10%, or Sacramento in California wants to increase the tree planting with 5 million new trees in 10 years. Shanghai wants to plant another 2 million trees, and so on. And if you ask the designers, the people, the artists that can look into the future, I don't have the ability, but when you ask them, what kind of color will the future be? Oh my God, it's going to be green. Look at this. This is the famous Stefan Gueres, the Italian architect. This is his vision of Xinjiang in China. Michael Sorkin, this is his vision of Manhattan, New York. Look at this. Imagine growing onions on the Fifth Avenue in New York, or Paris, in less than 30 years for this. Because the reason for this is that we can have this language, we can argue that the space between buildings, along roads, in parks, this infrastructure, this is where we can create this kind of resilience for the challenges we have in front of us, with a changing climate, but also an urbanization. More and more people are moving to cities. There's a concentration around cities. That's why, of course, we need the greenery in so many aspects, both technological but also physiological. We need greenery in order to become healthy people. But there is, of course, challenges when it comes to create this kind of greenery. And it's not rocket science, but this is what it is. When it comes to tree planting or vegetation structure, it's not rocket science to think about it when it comes to that. The bigger and the healthier the trees are, the higher capacity the trees and the tree planting have in order to delivering the ecosystem services, the benefits that we sometimes have as a starting point, why we should have greenery, why we should have trees and so on. And of course, a big tree with lush, dense canopy, of course, can give better shade, lower the temperatures. Can, through extension, reduce the consequences with storm water management. All the same, yeah, for biodiversity, but also taking up pollutions by filtering air and so on. So that means that the old trees, the large trees, the healthy trees we have today in urban environment are super important to keep large and healthy. But at the same time, that tree that we are planting today, planning to plant, needs to become this. It's not hard to understand, but that gives an idea that here is where we can make a difference, which means the plant selection is the most important and crucial link in a chain of sustainable urban environment, nature-based solution, green infrastructure, all these buzzwords we are throwing around. It's all coming down to here, plant selection. Because if you fail there, and forcing plants into a situation where they have no idea how to handle, of course, this is Sweden. I promise there will be pieces of this in Poland as well. But this is a very common sight where we're forcing trees into a situation where they physiological have no idea how to handle. Even this site is better than it looks. They have structural soil and stormwater management, but still, this is a sycamore maple, one of the most moist demanding species among the large growing maples. So it's not rocket science to understand that this plantation will fail. And this tree will never ever become an important green infrastructure and delivering these important ecosystem services. And the scary thing with this kind of situation, it is 25 to 40%, because 25 to 40% of trees that fail establishment, failing to develop, that needs to be removed, will never ever become replanted. Because if you think about it, if you have a budget, €1 million to build a house, you don't have an extra €100,000 just in case the roof falls off. No. That's the same situation when it comes to landscape architecture or landscape planning. You have a budget to make planting pits, to buy the plants, watering so they establish, and that's it. You don't have extra money to just do it all over again because you're failing. And that means that urban tree planners, landscape architects, designers never or very seldom get a second chance. We need to be sure from the first beginning when it comes to tree selection. And of course, there is a lot of challenges in this, and these are the two challenges that I think we need to be very, very into. Of course, develop knowledge and experience of different tree species capacity delivering ecosystem services, which means that we need to move away from this quantitative view of the more trees we're planting, the better it's going to be. It's not true. We can actually create a negative, worse situation by planting too many trees or planting trees in a wrong situation, especially in urban environment when it comes, for example, pollution or climate mitigations and so on. So we need to go into details to be species specific, but also site specific. We have to go into quality rather than quantity. I won't go into that a little bit. And secondly, develop knowledge and experience of different tree systems capacities for different growing habitats. Because we need to know what makes a tree sensitive or tolerant. How does it fit that particular space? In that particular microclimate, on that particular street, or square, or a roof garden, or whatever. We need to know more about the details. But the scary thing is one even more important factor. That's the one. Developing knowledge of above mentioned categories, but towards an untraditional plant materials. So everything you have learned in school, it's not worthless. You need to add more knowledge about plants. Because as I said in the beginning, we need to know, it's all about the selection. If we fail there, we have no chance of succeeding further on when it comes to all these benefits connected to plants in the urban environment. And this is the Scandinavian situation. Look at this. Because what we have today is that we have a very uneven diversity of trees in urban environments. Look at here, in Helsinki, the capital of Finland, This is both in public, park environment, but also street environment. 44% of all the trees in Helsinki on public land is lime trees. And in street environment in Oslo, the capital of Norway, almost half of the tree population in street environment is just one species of lime. It's scary. But this is not a Scandinavian problem. This is an international problem. Here is from Pittsburgh, US, Beijing, China, Camden, which is a borough in London, UK, or Barcelona and Spain. You can see 3 to 4 species stands for the half of the tree population in urban environments. And the risk, of course, is if these overused tree species get affected by a pest or diseases, or even can't cope with this new climate, imagine the loss of tree species. And an example of that is an outbreak of this. Bear in mind, this is the Asian longboard beetle. It's this big. It's not this big, okay? It's beautiful, but it's not nice. And if we have an outbreak of Asian longboard beetle, which is not if, it's more when will it happen. Helsinki have an ongoing outbreak of Asian longboard beetle in Helsinki. Many people thought, it's too north, it's too cold, but it's not true. But you see the number, 136 to 188. This is the amount of species of host trees that these species goes on and kill or just make vulnerable. And this is some of the few species. Look at that. And some of these species are some of the most common species we have in urban environments around the globe, especially the northern hemisphere. And this is dark stuff, okay? It will be more positive for zoos, all right? But we did a study just to see the tree loss scenarios in 10 Nordic cities in the Scandinavian region. You can see here, Gothenburg, or let's take Stockholm. Look at that, different scenarios. This realistic scenario or worst case scenario. Even in a realistic scenario, it could be almost half of the tree population in Stockholm will disappear because of this uneven diversity of tree species, which means that we need to move away from these traditional plant materials towards the more untraditional plant materials, which is a big step. Because as a designer and landscape architect, sometimes it feels comfortable to continue working with the plants you know, and then it used over and over and over again, which create these scenarios. And imagine the loss of trees and thereby the loss of ecosystem service connected to these trees and tree plantings, which is just a thing we can't live with. So in order to deal with this, we also need to move towards some really uncomfortable things to talk about. One of them is this. I don't know how it's in Poland, but in many parts of Europe, North America, and even in Asia, this is a big thing. We might need to go outside our comfortable zone and start to work with the untraditional plant materials, which also includes non-traditional species. In a Western, Central European, Western European, and Northwestern European situation, for us in urban environment, it's a non-question to move towards this scenario. In a study we did a few years ago, we took all our native tree species and forced them through 2 filters. The first filter was, how many of our native tree flora doesn't have or will have any problem with diseases and pests, like serious diseases and pests, things that kills and harm trees that are fully healthy, standing on sites, which is optimal for them. More than half of the trees of the native flora of the Scandinavia fell off. They don't have the bright future because there's a lot of diseases and pests already around, but will soon come. The next filter was, of these remaining species, which species have the capacity to grow successfully in inner city environments, where it's much warmer and drier. Only 4 species was left. So go around and talk about native only and realize that we only have 4 species that have a bright future in the Western Europe. You hear it? It's not possible. So we need to look towards this scenario. Doesn't have to be that we are open the Pandora's box of diseases or invasive species. There's a lot of species that we have been growing in botanical gardens, in parks for decades, even centuries, haven't moved. So we need to develop this green list rather than this black and red list and so on. But in order to go towards this and start to move towards the untraditional plant materials, we need to develop this new language I was talking about earlier. We need to develop even further, especially among these untraditional plant materials. And sometimes you have to bring in the bright minds, the philosophers that have all the answers. My guy is Mike Tyson. He'd say, everybody have a plan until you get punched in the face. And this has been my phrase in my research the last 20, 25 years. Because climate change, urban environment, is a punch in the face for a plant. A heat wave 2018 in Sweden, that was the biggest punch. This summer was the warmest summer ever recorded in the Scandinavian region. Another punch after punch. We need to talk about which kind of plan these trees have. Because when we buy a car or buy a computer, we go into detail to talk about what kind of use do we gotta have for this car or computer. Do I need 4-wheel drive? What kind of radio should I air condition? On the computer, what kind of game should I do? Or just gonna writing? We do our homework when it comes to buying cars and buying computers, even clothes. But when it comes to plants, it's like, yeah, it should be 12 meters tall, 5 meters wide, flowering, yes please, watercolors, all right, very nice, cool. That's pretty much it. And then we decide which trees. We need to go into detail about the capacity trees have in order to cope with this new normal. And this is where we don't have this plan when it comes to these untraditional plant materials. So the research we've done the last 10, 15 years is to establish this kind of language, but focus on these untraditional plant materials. This is, I just follow up the last speaker about stormwater management. Which trees can we use in stormwater management, in rain gardens? How can they cope with flooding? What are they doing in order to cope with flooding? How they recover from flooding? And what are they doing in order to recover from flooding fast? And why are some slow? This is the type of language we need to develop. Because we have it when we build houses. What kind of plant material, or what kind of roof material, walls, glasses. We talk about that when it comes to buildings. We need to do it when it comes to plant materials as well. This is an evaluation of the big-leaved alder, the subcordata from Azerbaijan and northern Iran. Coped with 63 days underwater and was still fine. Just laugh at us. Come on, bring it on. So this is a tree that can cope with flooding really, really well. But this is not enough. We need to go to understand why it's successful. But also drought tolerance. The last 10, 15 years, we evaluated not only which trees are drought tolerant, but also what makes them drought tolerant. And this is a compilation of over 190 species, and we are still counting another 40, 50 this year, where we evaluate the physiological capacity to tolerate a drought. Because if you look at books, nursery catalogs, it's very much based on normally old men, almost perspective, their observation and their experience, rather than quantitative and physiological, because this is what the trees tell you how tolerant they are. Because then we can move away from this qualitative perspective when it comes to I think is drought tolerant, they might think it's a little bit sensitive. Now, we don't have to deal with that. We can actually go into the fact that makes some better than others. And this has been done also for shrubs. This is a study we published last year. Over 200 different species of cultivar shrubs where it's possible to quantify the capacity to take drought. So this is the language we need to develop in order to diversify the urban forest. We need to find a language, and especially we need to this language when it comes to these untraditional rare ones. But it's not only this tolerance for sight. It's also important to understand which trees have the best capacity to deliver specific ecosystem services. This is a project we have been working on the last 7 years or so, where we evaluate the tree's capacity to increase a positive air quality in urban environment by measuring which trees have the capacity to take up particles in the air and thereby increase the quality. And even here we can see PIH. This is a particular type of particle which is very dangerous, very cancerous. That's a difficult word, I don't know the English, but you can get a lot of cancer out anyway. But here you can see the differences between a sorbus and a pine tree. Or a fir tree. Because this is the stuff we need to move towards. Talk about quality rather than quantity. So my final conclusion here is we need to diversify our urban forestry. To do that, we need to be really good at plants. And so good at plants, so we can argue, why is that better than that one? What makes that species better than that one? And also, which tree have the capacity to delivering the ecosystem the best, and why? Because if we can develop this why and how, we can move forward and have this real future that everybody wants into the future. Because it's all about tree selection there, or plant selection, generally. So thank you very much. And if you want to have more information, I will be around. But also we published a book 6 months ago, and the book I had one copy, so I can sell one. But please have a look at the book. It's in English, hopefully we can translate it in Polish someday. But this is the book where we're trying to put all this information, not mine, everybody else's information, in order to start this movement, in order to develop a language when it comes to why to plant a tree there and not there. Thank you very much for having me. It's been an honor.